Sing all. See that you join with the congregation as frequently as you can. Let not a single degree of weakness or weariness hinder you. If it is a cross to you, take it up, and you will find it a blessing. Sing lustily and with good courage. Beware of singing as if you were half dead or half asleep, but lift up your voice with strength. Be no more afraid of your voice now, no more ashamed of its being heard than when you sung the songs of Satan. Such are John Wesley's rather stern instructions in his appendage to a collection of hymns designed for congregational use. Just as the German people cherish and celebrate the enormous musical contribution of the Bach family, so too do the English cherish and celebrate that of the Wesleys in a similar way. Their combined musical output spanned over 200 years, the family producing some of the finest examples of hymnody, chamber music, organ repertoire, and choral works in England. Each of the Wesleys uniquely influenced a particular realm of musical expression. Brothers John and Charles are chiefly remembered for their contribution to English hymnody, with a combined output of over 6,500 hymns. In contrast, Charles' son Samuel is better known for his organ compositions and orchestral symphonies, while his son, Samuel Sebastian's name, is synonymous with some of the greatest anthems in the English choral tradition. The history of the Wesley family begins with brothers John and Charles, and their years at Oxford University. Here, in 1727, Charles began the Oxford Methodist Group, an evangelistic revival movement within the Anglican Church. 2 years later, his elder brother John joined and soon rose to lead the group, moulding it to his own notions. This movement would lay the foundations of the Methodist denomination. A trip to Savannah, Georgia in 1735 saw both Charles and John undergo something of a spiritual reawakening. After this experience, Charles returned to England and dedicated the rest of his life to setting out in poetry the mysteries of grace, mercy, and salvation. Charles, affectionately known as the sweet singer of Methodism, would go on to offer over 6,500 hymns on hundreds of scripture texts and on every conceivable phase of Christian experience and Methodist theology. Among them are the popular and beloved "O for a Thousand Tongues to Sing," "Love Divine, All Loves Excelling," and "Rejoice, the Lord is King." While not a composer himself, Charles would always stipulate the well-known tune to which he wanted his words sung. This was an innovation at the time, as the tradition had been that set words would always be sung to a set melody. Charles would conceive his poetry with the intent that it be sung to a well-known melody written by someone else. His brother John's contribution to hymnody was also significant, through the translation of hundreds of Latin and German hymn texts into English. The life story of the Wesley brothers is remarkable, and even more when one realizes that Charles had never written a hymn before his conversion experience. Charles married the much younger Sarah Gwynn in 1749 and had a number of children, though only 3 survived infancy: Charles Jr., Samuel, and Sarah. Charles Wesley Jr. was regarded as a musical prodigy in childhood and was playing the organ before the age of 3. He became a professional musician in adulthood. However, he did not enjoy public performance and worked mainly as a private organist, at one time to the Prince Regent. His brother Samuel, a contemporary of Mozart, was often referred to as the English Mozart by Dr. William Boyce, Master of the King's Music and organist at the Chapel Royal. Samuel was celebrated in his time as both a fine composer and one of England's greatest organists. Samuel displayed tremendous musical promise from a young age, having composed 2 oratorios before the age of 11. He would go on to make a name for himself as a composer of symphonic and virtuosic organ works, working primarily as a conductor and lecturer. A lifelong admirer and scholar of the works of J.S. Bach, his performances of Bach's organ works were unrivaled. Indeed, it was Samuel who first brought an edition of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier to England in 1810. In 1788, Samuel was initiated into Freemasonry and appointed as the first organist of the Grand Lodge of England, a position that was created for him. He went on to compose a vast collection of Masonic odes and anthems. Despite his various successes, Samuel was constantly afflicted by debilitating bouts of despondency and depression after a traumatic accident he suffered at the age of 21. The relapses from this accident, which often lasted years, forced Samuel to abandon music for extended periods of time throughout his working life. Nevertheless, Samuel was hailed by his generation as the greatest English organist. His friend and contemporary, Felix Mendelssohn, himself a strong advocate for the music of J.S. Bach, proclaimed Samuel the father of English organ playing. His compositions were numerous and varied, and regarded by some as being at the highest standard of excellence. Yet still, opinions on his significance are divided, as his contributions to English music were largely ignored and disregarded by his contemporaries, in favour of the more fashionable continental styles of Mozart and Haydn. His instrumental music shows that he was, to a certain extent, a pioneer of the symphonic style in England, although much of it has fallen into obscurity. Wesley's friend and renowned music publisher Vincent Novello said of him, "Samuel Wesley was one of the greatest musical geniuses that England ever produced." This is true. He was the most important composer of the classical period in England, the very opposite of insular or provincial. His importance lies partly in his musical style, partly in his very clear aesthetic purpose, partly in his position historically in the English musical tradition. His mature style represents a meeting point of many traditions. His best works are the first by an English composer in the classical vein to link the English musical heritage of the past with the mainstream European tradition of his time in a musical language that is both individual and distinctive. During his lifetime, he was largely ignored, and after his death the arbiters of Victorian taste disowned him, largely in favour of his organist son. Samuel Wesley's marriage to his wife Charlotte broke up with the discovery of Samuel's affair with the teenage domestic servant girl Sarah Suter. Samuel and Sarah never married, but had 4 children, among them Samuel Sebastian. Given Samuel Sr.'s love of the music of J.S. Bach, it is no surprise that his son was given the middle name of Sebastian. From his father, Samuel Sebastian also inherited his great love of and devotion to the music of J.S. Bach. Like his father, Samuel Sebastian displayed musical talent from a very early age, and, with little effort, his father secured for him a position as a boy chorister in the choir of the Chapel Royal. Wesley's choirmaster, William Hawes, took such a liking to Samuel Sebastian that, once his voice broke, Hawes continued to employ him as a choral conductor and pianist at the English Opera House. Samuel Sebastian embarked on a career as a church musician, and at the age of 22 was appointed organist and choirmaster at Hereford Cathedral, a position he abruptly left vacant after eloping with the dean's daughter. Thus began his reputation as a difficult and unreliable character. Yet during his time at Hereford, he composed his 2 most popular and well-loved anthems, Blessed Be the God and Father, and The Wilderness. He went on to hold organist and choirmaster positions at Exeter, Winchester, and Gloucester cathedrals, all appointments that ultimately led to his termination, resignation, and to poisonous relations to his superiors within the church. It was during his time at Winchester that he composed the anthems Ascribe unto the Lord, O Lord, thou art my God, and thou wilt keep him in perfect peace. As well as establishing a reputation as a fine composer, contemporary accounts exist attesting to his virtuosity as an organist. It was said that his fingers and feet moved so swiftly as he played that people would gather round just to watch him. Having produced very little instrumental or secular work, Samuel Sebastian's contribution to English music lies chiefly in several late and very fine examples of the verse anthem, a choral form first developed during the English Restoration, which contrasts unison and contrapuntal sections with smaller, more intimate passages for solo voices or voice. His other contributions include improving conditions, salaries, and the status of church music and musicians. He was also instrumental in improving organ building, advocating the use of the full pedalboard on English organs. Samuel Sebastian's choral style is defined by its genuine beauty and distinction. The German composer Louis Spohr once described it as distinguished by a noble style and by rich, well-chosen harmonies, as well as by surprisingly beautiful modulations. Indeed, Samuel Sebastian was a great admirer of both Spohr and Mendelssohn, and in particular, studied their uses of chromaticism and modulation. The lives of the Wesleys represent both challenge and triumph, their musical output reflecting and contributing to the society in which they inhabited. John's determination to elevate church singing, the enormous influence of the poetry of Charles' hymns and their musical treatments in both Britain and America, Samuel's range and rugged individuality as a composer, the oracular boldness of son Sebastian's religious music. These things all stand to confirm the contribution the Wesleys made to both English sacred and secular music across 2 centuries.